Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta's finance minister says for the third straight year, our province has balanced the books and billions will be going towards paying down the debt. The province also announced a massive $4.5 million investment for the town of Coaldale. We will explain what the funding will be going towards. And we hear from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, which says the feds are now spending close to $2 million promoting a federal carbon tax to other countries.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Finance Minister Nate Horner says our province is in pretty good shape financially. He says for the third straight year, Alberta has balanced its budget, ending with a $4.3 billion surplus. He says the province will be allocating $3.7 billion in debt repayment, with $1.7 billion being repaid this year and $2 billion being repaid in the year 2024-2025 fiscal year.
We provided the highest ever funding to healthcare and ensured our children had access to the best teachers in schools. Kept Albertans and communities safe during last year's record-breaking wildfire season, and supported farmers as they faced drought conditions throughout the province. We provided targeted relief payments that went to families, seniors, and vulnerable groups to help with the high cost of living. Plus, we indexed personal income taxes and social support programs. Alberta's tax advantage is being maintained as well, with new legislation that guarantees Albertans and businesses won't see their income tax rates rise without approval through a referendum. And still, beyond supporting these important priorities and programs for Albertans, we repaid maturing debt and put aside meaningful savings that will create prosperity for our kids and grandkids.
Horner says the Heritage Fund also grew to a record high $22.9 billion. That includes $1.7 billion in annual investments earnings. As we head into the Canada Day long weekend, many Albertans are wondering if the Alberta government, like the Manitoba government, will pause the provincial fuel tax once again. That would save Albertans around 13 cents a litre at the pumps. Alberta Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf says since the price of oil has been lower lately, we may not see that much needed break as we hit the roads for our summer holidays.
First of all, I need to assure everybody that that program in Alberta is in place. It has always remained in place. It is a permanent program. And now it's based on the price of oil. And there's a calculation for that. Most of the last quarter, though, that price was well below the $80 threshold, which initiates that program from being in place. If you take the 20 business days before the 15th day of the last month of the quarter, so in this case, June 15, the 20 working days before that, and average the price of oil, you come in just a little bit under than the $80 barrel threshold. So the benefit to Albertans is a low cost of fuel, relatively speaking, but there's no additional tax rebate, which kicks in as that price average increases above $80 to coming completely off if it's above $90 a barrel.
The Alberta government is giving the town of Coaldale $4.5 million. According to MLA Grant Hunter, the funding will be used for a major water infrastructure project. Coaldale Mayor Jack Van Ryan says the money is a huge blessing for his community. He expressed the importance of this investment for the municipality since the funds will be used to build a new water reservoir and a pumping station.
With growth projections that we have right now, our current infrastructure will only have enough water to last another 5 years. And with this just a little over $13 million project that we're doing will give us potable water supplies for decades. So it's much needed. It couldn't come at a better time. And we're looking forward to getting shovels in the ground and getting the project started. With the expansion announcement by McCain's, we had to move the potable water reservoir up a couple of years. And with that being needed to be done, that put us in a bit of a strain because we didn't have funding available for the entire amount. And with the $13 million project, the $4.5 million that we just received today from the provincial government will go a long ways in getting us this project complete.
We just made a big announcement in Coaldale, the largest business investment, $222 million food logistics center is going to be built here. New Cold is coming, a multinational company, and so they're going to be coming in. More people are going to be coming to work here. This is the kind of growth that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years in this area, because as we build out this agri-food processing corridor, those companies will come and those families will come. So it's an exciting time to be here. But with that, we're going to have to build roads, and we're going to have to build waterways and wastewater facilities. As you know, in Calgary, water has been top of mind for many of the residents, obviously in Calgary. It's important to make sure that we keep up on the infrastructure in not just the bigger cities, but also in the smaller communities like this.
Officials say construction on the new reservoir and pump station will begin next month and should be completed by late 2025. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling out the Trudeau government for a failed bid to get countries around the world to impose carbon taxes like we have here in Canada. Now, to chat about this in more detail is the federal director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, who joins us from Ottawa. Franco, the feds also spent a lot of taxpayer money promoting a federal carbon tax as well?
Well, the federal government is spending $1.7 million trying to get other countries to impose the carbon tax. Now, the carbon tax is a complete failure, but so is this program. It's a big waste of money, because here is the matter of fact. About 70% of countries do not have a national carbon tax. About 70% of countries do not have a national carbon tax. And that also includes like 3 of the 4 world's largest emitters, like the United States, Russia, and India. They do not have carbon taxes. So, I mean, all you have to do to know that this is a complete waste of money and an utter failure is just look south of the border to the United States and their unwillingness to impose a carbon tax there. And I mean, like, if you can't even get our biggest trading partner and ally to impose a carbon tax, then why are you spending all this money, wasting all this money trying to get other countries to impose this devastating tax?
So from your research, Franco, how successful has the carbon tax been here in Canada for helping to really cut down on emissions?
Not successful at all. I mean, about 70% of countries do not have a national carbon tax, right? So all that the carbon tax in Canada is doing is making the necessities of life more expensive. So look, like, this is bad news for Canadian taxpayers, right? Because you're paying a carbon tax here, making the necessities of life more expensive. Then you're paying about 200 million tax dollars for the bureaucrats to administer the carbon tax in Canada. And now it turns out you're also paying about $1.7 million for the Trudeau government to try to get other countries to impose this failing and very hurtful carbon tax in those other countries.
Thanks so much for your time today, Franco. That was the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano, joining us from Ottawa. Federal Health Minister Mark Collins says his government's dental care plan is expanding. He says children under the age of 18 and anyone with a valid disability tax credit certificate are now eligible to apply for dental coverage under Ottawa's plan for uninsured Canadians.
Pierre Poilievre said that the dental care plan didn't exist. Well, for a plan that didn't exist, in 6 weeks, 200,000 people have gotten care. Almost 11,500 providers, representing about 40% of providers across the country, are participating. Almost all hygienists, almost all denturists are participating. And when we talk about those 200,000 people, before we make this announcement, I think it's time to just take a moment and think about who they are. You know, I was talking to 2 days ago in Windsor, Navjeet. Navjeet runs a mobile clinic. She calls it the Smile Wagon, and she goes and she visits folks. And she was meeting one of her patients who hadn't been able to get dentures in her mouth, and when found out she was going to be able to get dentures, said she finally was going to arrange family photos because she was proud of her smile.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh applauded the federal government's announcement of expanding the Canadian dental care plan, but he says it still has some serious gaps.
Well, some seniors are able to get in and get the care they need and not have to pay any money out of pocket. Other seniors are being charged, and this is not what we had agreed to. We had wanted a program where people go in and get care and don't spend any money out of pocket. But we're hearing about patients, about seniors so far, that have had to pay out of pocket. That should not happen. We also know that there are communities that are not getting access. There are people that can't get a dentist in their communities. And we had said very clearly that Justin Trudeau needed to make sure that we expanded access with different programs to ensure that people in rural or remote communities were able to get care as well.
So far this week, the jury at the Coots 2 trial was presented with footage of Anthony Olenek being questioned by police shortly after his arrest back on February 14th of 2022 during the Coots border blockade here in Alberta. BCN's Landon Hickok has more details on what transpired at the Lethbridge courthouse. Landon?
That's right, Hal. As you just mentioned there, when Anthony Olenek was being questioned by officers shortly after his arrest at the Coots border blockade, he expressed his shock at the charges being named against him, including conspiring to murder police officers and illegal arms possession. He called those claims bizarre. Now, we also understand when an officer was able to inform him that the protest was being disbanded in due part because of his and others' arrests, he started breaking down in tears and insisted all they were trying to be were protectors. And an officer was also questioning him about the guns that he had in possession, and he claimed all they were for self-defense, and that he never intended to threaten any police officers unless they started shooting at them. But he was quoted saying, "But it wouldn't be you guys, it would be UN guys or the Chinese." This comes as he also commented about how he was worried how Canada would be shaped into a communist regime. And we can also point back to his other comments in the past where he called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau the devil and police officers his arms. Now, defense lawyers are circling back to the witness testimonies of undercover police officers a couple of weeks ago. One in particular, the defense lawyers are claiming broke ethical and legal laws by potentially flirting with Anthony Olenek when she was undercover at the Coots border blockade. In particular, in text conversations between them, displayed many heart emojis between the two. All this comes as the trial is expected to be overlooking the data from phones that were seized at the Coots border blockade. And whenever updates from that do come, we'll bring it to you on Bridge City News. Al?
Thanks so much, Landon. Over a week after a major breach at the St. Mary's Siphon in Montana, the local Blackfeet tribe is working with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to take the next steps in the area. The siphon, you may remember, initially supplied the Milk River with water from the St. Mary River, both rivers that are vitally important for irrigation here in southern Alberta and Montana. Now, the immediate priorities now include restoring access to the Hooks Hideaway Hotel that was damaged during the rupture, along with cleaning sediment from the St. Mary River. Since the incident, the Milk River has been largely seen depleted levels of water from a flow rate of 17.5 cubic meters a second to just 1 cubic meter a second. The timetable for any repairs or future diversions remains unknown. Commuter traffic in Calgary is returning to normal following a major water main break there 3 weeks ago. Mayor Jody Gondek says the avenue above the repaired water main is set to reopen on Friday. She says the new pavement may be a little bumpy because it hasn't been leveled yet, but it should be good enough to drive on. The pipe break has been repaired. Officials are now running their tests, and if all goes well, water restrictions could be lifted as early as Monday. As we age, our ability to hear may diminish a little bit. But how do we recognize hearing issues in our kids? Mitchell Harris, audiologist with Hearing Life in Lethbridge, gives some tips on what we need to look out for.
So often things you're looking for is, changes in behavior. So they might get more withdrawn or frustrated and feel like they're not, participating in the same way. Looking for those speech and language milestones, and if they're delayed that way, then that's a good indicator that hearing might play a role there. You might have them mispronouncing words or mishearing words, especially when they're really little. Then you're looking for things like having them, not react to loud sounds. So if big brother's beside them and is banging on pots and they're not responding at all, then it's probably not that they're just used to that. It's probably that they're not hearing that sound come through.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with audiologist Mitchell Harris and BCN's Michael Clausen coming up after Business News. Environmental experts in the United States say wildfires from Canada last year pumped more heat-trapping carbon dioxide into the air than airplanes do in an entire year. They say it set ablaze an area of forest larger than West Virginia.
Forest fires in Canada released about 2.98 billion tons of carbon dioxide, which is about 4 times as much carbon as global aviation sector, and about 25% higher than the emissions from all primary tropical tree cover loss in 2023. Forests worldwide are known as carbon sinks, so they remove a lot of carbon from the atmosphere, and that gets stored in their branches, their trunks, their leaves kind of in the ground as well. And so when they burn, all the carbon that's stored within them gets released back into the atmosphere. And so that's kind of that connection between forest fires and carbon emissions.
A wildfire in Oregon's high desert near the popular vacation spot of Bend is growing quite rapidly. It has so far scorched more than 2,400 acres. Emergency crews have urged the continued evacuations of around 1,000 homes in the area, best known for its microbreweries, hiking, river rafting, and skiing on nearby Mount Bachelor. The Darlene 3 fire exploded to life on Tuesday afternoon in the Deschutes National Forest, which is located around 30 miles or 50 kilometers outside of Bend, Oregon. Firefighters say the wildfire is only around 30% contained. 3 bodies were found at the summit of Mount Fuji on the most famous mountain in Japan. One of the bodies had been brought down from the slopes, but efforts to bring back the other 2 bodies were set to continue over the weekend. Officials said the search was originally called off on Thursday due to heavy rainfall in the area. Canada Day is coming up on Monday, a special time to enjoy our country's 157th birthday. During Canada Day here in Lethbridge, the city will host 2 large events featuring a wide range of recreational activities and free services for the community. Janessa Brown, co-chair of the festivities for the City of Lethbridge, has the details.
So to start off the Canada Day festivities, we will be at Galt Gardens, where we'll start off with the Interfaith Food Bank Charity Breakfast, which will begin at 9 o'clock sharp. If we jump over to Henderson Lake, our festivities will begin at 11 o'clock with our main stage entertainment, where we have an amazing lineup of performers and dancers.
I'm going to make a big deal of this Canada Day free transit service because this is the first time ever, at least in 20 years to my history, we've done free Canada Day service all day from 8 in the morning until close to midnight, that lots of the public comes out, uses that free bus morning, noon, or evening, and try to avoid those busy parking lots. And the reason we're giving it for free on a statutory holiday is because ridership is generally lower on a stat holiday, so we're trying to get bums in the seats.
City officials also say construction on the Woopot Bridge will begin fairly soon. The rehabilitation work will start on Tuesday, July 2nd, and continue until Labor Day. Richard Brummett, road infrastructure manager at the City of Lethbridge, says that through the annual bridge inspection program, the need for bridge repairs was identified.
So we're working on the concrete surface, repairing that, and then there's a slope or a approach slab rehab on the west end that needs some mud jacking, and then finishing with sealing all the concrete surfaces to protect them. On the surface, right, there'll be sores or repairs required, so they kind of hammer out the concrete and then they pour new concrete to kind of remove all the voids and stuff underneath to prolong the life of the bridge.
Yeah, it'll be nice to see that bridge finally repaired. Well, we enjoy more light showers today across much of southwestern Alberta, and the moisture should remain for another day or so. Full weather details are on deck. Well, we had some periods of rain again today in Lethbridge with lots of cloud cover. Tonight, expect more rain in the forecast with a low near 8 degrees. Friday, more rain developing with a high near 18. Now, the rain clouds should move on just in time for the weekend. Expect clouds mixed with sunshine and a high of 21 for Saturday. Partly cloudy, but a beautiful 25 degrees on Sunday. Canada Day, holiday Monday, it should be mainly sunny with a high near 23. Tuesday and Wednesday, just a few clouds are in the forecast with a high near 21 for both days. Now, the average high for this time of year is 24 degrees with an average low of 10. The record high was a balmy 32 degrees set back in 2002, and the record low was only +2 in 2007. The sun rose at 5:26 and set at 9:43. Let's see how Friday is shaping up across the country now. Expect sunshine mixed with clouds and a high of 17 degrees in Victoria, partly cloudy and a high of 20 in Vancouver. Edmonton should be mainly sunny with a high near 22. Rain expected in Calgary with a high of only 18 degrees for Friday. There should be rain as well and 16 degrees in Regina. Showers and 15 is on tap for Saskatoon. Lots of moisture in Winnipeg as well with a high near 17 degrees expected. In the central part of the country, lots of clear sky. Look at that. Sunny and 23 for Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. Beautiful in central Canada. It looks like more of a mixed bag, however, in Atlantic Canada. Expect clouds with a high of 23 in Fredericton. Sunshine mixed with clouds and a high of 21 for Halifax. rain and 18 degrees in Charlottetown. And in St. John's, expect an overcast day with showers and a high of 19 degrees on Friday. WestJet says a potential strike by hundreds of its airplane mechanics would upend travel plans for about 250,000 customers over the Canada Day long weekend. The Calgary-based carrier says it would also cost millions of dollars. WestJet has already called off around 25 trips today and tomorrow in anticipation of possible job action by the Aircraft Fraternal Association. The union has threatened to hit the picket lines as early as Friday evening. But it appears as though a strike has been averted. This just in. In an order received late this afternoon, the Minister of Labour ordered the Canada Industrial Relations Board to impose final binding arbitration to resolve the outstanding terms of the collective bargaining agreement. So that's good news. It appears as though more foreign workers are transitioning to permanent residency at higher rates in recent years. According to Stats Canada, between 2016 and 2020, more than 20% of foreign workers became permanent residents 2 years after obtaining their first work permits. That was up from about 12% between 2011 and 2015. This data suggests temporary residency is a more significant pathway to permanent residency here in our country. Another United States news organization is suing ChatGPT maker OpenAI and its business partner Microsoft. And the reason? Alleged copyright infringement. The Center for Investigative Reporting says it filed a lawsuit focusing on artificial intelligence-generated summaries of news articles threaten publishers. Copyright infringement cases have already been brought forth by the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and best-selling authors including John Grisham. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 148 points on the day to finish at 21,942. The Dow was up 36 points to 39,164. The S&P 500 was up 4 on the day to 5482, and the Nasdaq was up 53 points to 17,858. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 84 cents to 81.74 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 5 cents to 2.70 US. Gold was up $29.50 on the day to $23.2773 US an ounce, and silver was up 20 cents to $28.97 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.03 per bushel, barley's at $6.03, canola's at $14, and corn is at $7.34 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.25 to $194.18. Feeder cattle were down $1.13 to $260.65. That's for the August contract. And the July contract for lean hogs was down 45 cents to 89.45. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.01 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta Finance Minister Nate Horner discussed our province's fiscal year-end results, and it was good news. He says for the third straight year, Alberta has balanced its budget, ending with a $4.3 billion surplus. He says the province will be allocating $3.7 billion to debt repayment, with $1.7 billion being repaid this year and $2 billion being paid in the 2024-25 fiscal year. Horner also says the Heritage Fund grew to a record high of $22.9 billion. That includes $1.7 billion in annual investments earnings. So what contributes to hearing loss, and especially tinnitus, and hearing loss with our children? Coming up, we're going to chat with an audiologist who explains the best way you can protect and improve your hearing. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Well, for some of us, as we age, our ability to hear may diminish. Naturally, this can cause new challenges for us. Of course, sometimes hearing loss can even happen in children. What are the symptoms and what are the solutions? Well, today's guest has some answers for us. Mitchell Harris is an audiologist with Hearing Life here in Lethbridge. Good to have you with us, Mitchell.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have a little chat about hearing. Now, how can a person tell if they have some form of hearing loss? Maybe what are the typical symptoms?
It's often pretty gradual. Sometimes you might have something where you wake up and you're not hearing what you feel like you should, but more often it's just it might be people around you that are feeling like, they're having to repeat more often, or they're just not very clear, or people are mumbling a little bit more. Sometimes you're mistaking words, so you're having a conversation that's different than the person you're talking to. You might be starting to struggle to hear more in groups or social situations, or find yourself often doing the smile and nod without being quite sure what's going on around. So it can be present in a lot of different ways, but mostly just when you're feeling like that communication isn't flowing so easily, whether you're noticing it for yourself, or someone else is letting you know, then it's probably some hearing is changing a little bit there.
Gotcha. Now, before we really delve into the subject, let's dive into the inner ear. Can hearing loss even affect a person's balance as well?
It can. So inside the inner ear, then you've got, neighboring systems there. There's the hearing center and the balance that are all kind of within that shared space. And so, how exactly it relates, it can kind of vary. There's a higher level of, fall risk with a higher level of hearing loss.
Yeah, I
So
hadn't thought of that.
yeah, so some of it is like there's some correlation there, whether it's a direct correlation or whether there's other factors involved. Often with higher hearing loss, there's often higher age as well, so there's other factors that play a role too. But there's certainly that strong connection between the hearing and the balance.
Right. Now, we do know also that the ear, nose, and throat are all connected. Can one of those other two systems affect our hearing?
They can, for sure. Yeah, especially you'll notice if you have a sinus infection or something like that, then your ears are going to feel plugged up, and it sounds like things are a little bit more mumbled. So yeah, everything's a lot more interconnected than we realize sometimes.
Right. Now, speaking of that interconnectedness, and living here in southern Alberta with sometimes the dramatic pressure changes in the wind, have you found from your clients that maybe that's an issue as well for them?
It can be a little bit, especially with hearing aids and wind, they haven't got along so well dealing with those kind of things. And so you've got clients with, more sensitive ears where you're keeping them covered or putting cotton in your ears whenever it's windy to try and just help prevent some of those changes in that pressure. Um, but overall, things are improving for the better. Even with hearing aids, they do a lot better job in wind than they did in the past. And then there's other strategies we can use to try and prevent some of that pain or discomfort that can happen from those changes from pressure or wind.
Right. Now, this might sound a bit odd, but I wanted to ask you about earwax. We clean our face and our hands. Is there anything to cleaning our ears or having them cleaned?
There is, the first disclaimer there is you hear about in schools, don't put anything smaller than your elbow in your ear. And that's still a good rule to live by there. Often the wax that we'll see will be because someone's been using Q-tips or something, it ends up moving it back into the ear as opposed to kind of letting it come out by itself. We do see, with headphones and things like that, then there is more wax that gets built up. And so, if you're feeling like things aren't sounding very good, definitely have them looked at and see if there's some wax building up there. There are some kits you can get at home that are more of a drop or something to help break down the wax. And then in the shower, you can use a little bit of a water rinse to help move that out too. So there's things you can do, but ideally the ear will kind of take care of itself.
Oh, that's really interesting because, of course, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So, how do the ears maintain themselves?
Where the wax is produced is kind of the outer third portion of that ear canal. And that portion of the ear canal, the skin grows outwards. So as the wax is produced, then it's kind of on that moving escalator that's just taking it and all the debris out of the ear. So ideally, after you shower, you could just use a tissue and wipe the outside of your ear, and that would just take that as it moves it on out. But
Well, okay. Well, I appreciate that. As mundane as it might sound, it's very interesting to hear that it sounds like our ears are almost made to be a self-contained, self-maintenance system. Would you agree with that?
for sure, yeah.
Right. Now, you mentioned earbuds, and of course, I'm wearing my IFB. There's earmuffs, noise-canceling headphones, and of course, the ubiquitous white earbuds that people have. Can you talk a little bit about maybe health and safety related to those units?
Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting world we live in when it comes to putting something in your ears. It's getting more and more common to see those in as opposed to see them out. And so you're just wanting to make sure you're trying to keep that at a safe level. With anything in the hearing world for volume, then either really loud noises can start to cause damage, or something that's less loud for a long period of time can do that same, damage, or cause that same risk. So with those, headphones, things in your ear, you're wanting to make sure it's at a safe, comfortable volume. You're not cranking it up all the time, and then just make sure that you're not, having them in 24/7 if you can avoid it.
Right. And I'm sure that if people will realize their ears are starting to hurt a little bit, probably a personal indicator to turn that audio down, or just take them out and give your ears a break for a bit.
For sure, yeah. And with a lot of new technology, they have some warnings built in that'll tell you, you're exceeding this volume, and you have to kind of confirm it before you can go up. So if you do see those warnings, turn it down a
Yeah,
little
pay
bit.
attention, right? Now, I want to ask you about children and their ear health. Now, the little ones may not realize that they have a hearing problem. So, what should parents be on the lookout for?
In Alberta, we've got an infant hearing screening program, which is really good. So then make sure when you do have an infant to go to those appointments and get those checked. That helps catch a lot of those, newborn hearing problems there. But then also as they get older, then those hearing aid problems can arise that might not have been there before. So often things you're looking for is, changes in behavior. So they might get more withdrawn or frustrated and feel like they're not, participating in the same way. Looking for those speech and language milestones, and if they're delayed that way, then that's a good indicator that hearing might play a role there. You might have them mispronouncing words or mishearing words, especially when they're really little. Then you're looking for things like having them, not react to loud sounds. So if, big brother's beside them and is banging on pots and they're not responding at all, then it's probably not that they're just used to that. It's probably that they're not hearing that sound come through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Some telltale signs, so to speak, to see how the child's reacting as they're growing. So another question for us adults and parents, of course, maybe at what point should an adult have their hearing checked professionally?
First, I would say if you haven't, then you should do it. Um, Regardless of your age or kind of how you feel like your hearing is, it's always good to have a baseline. So if things do shift, then you've got something to compare it to. So that would be the first thing is go get that baseline test done. And then after that, it's kind of whenever you're feeling like there's a change, or you or someone close to you is feeling like something's not working the way it should. If those symptoms we talked about before, if you're asking for repetition or a lot, or just things aren't very clear, then get that hearing checked.
Right. So can you describe for us what happens during a hearing check, or maybe what kind of tests are done?
Yeah. So often, as you come through the hearing test, the tests are fairly similar, and kind of the flow might change depending on where you're at. But you're going to go through some of your case history of your background and what you've been noticing there. You'll have your ears looked into to see if things are looking typical there, if there's anything that might be causing the problem, whether it's wax or something else stuck in your ear. They'll do a few measurements on your ear to see how well the sound is getting through the middle ear space, if there's pressure or fluid that's causing some hearing loss there, and how well those inner hearing hair cells are responding to the sound. And then we'll kind of move into the hearing booth there, or the sound booth, and you'll do some, the infamous beep test that you hear about a lot, of listening to a beep and responding or pushing a button or raising your hand, and then some speech testing as well to see how well you're able to hear and respond to speech in quiet and in noise.
Hmm. Now, tinnitus is a common problem that can be debilitating because of its persistence. Can you talk a little bit about the causes and if there's any possible solutions or relief?
Yeah. So tinnitus it's a little bit of a gray area depending on kind of what the cause is. Sometimes it can just be something medical, where there might be a medical resolution for it to kind of resolve that. But most of the time, it's kind of unknown what the cause is. One of the leading theories there is, in simple terms, it's the brain trying to fill in for missing information. So with hearing loss or things, then we're not having the same sound come in, and the brain's realizing that something's not there. So it's kind of filling in that space with another sound. So often in those situations, things like a hearing aid can play a big role by filling that blank back in and giving you that sound again. There are other therapies you can look into for tinnitus. Often things like sound, white noise, different masking noise at nighttime can kind of help give the brain something else to focus on to help you fall asleep. Things like that. It's all pretty individual. So with that one, then we would certainly want to look at it more in deeper detail on a case-by-case basis with you in the clinic.
Right. So have you seen a connection between the ringing in one's ears and their diet, or as we talked about earlier, the weather patterns here in southern Alberta?
A little bit, there's some research that looks into, high sodium diet and alcohol, things like that can play a role in how much the ears are going to ring. Personally, I haven't seen it too much. It's typically more what I've seen a lot more of is related to noise and hearing loss there.
Gotcha. And just in general, overall ear health, has there been research connecting nutrition and hearing?
There has. There's, I'm not aware of anything recently to speak to particularly, but there has been a little bit typically associated more with, tinnitus or specific causes and what might be involved there.
Right. So what are some of the solutions for hearing loss? Does it mean a hearing aid in all cases, or are there other solutions?
So hearing aid is the most typical solution. It just depends on the kind of hearing loss that it is. So if it's something, if there's fluid in the middle ear, then you might need to go into kind of a medical intervention and have some surgery or something like that. But most of the time, a hearing aid is kind of what we would be looking at there.
Gotcha. Now, we're fortunate to have Alberta Health Services. Is there any tax dollars or money offered through AHS that helps with coverage for children or seniors, low-income households like that?
There is, yeah. So for seniors and low income and children, then there is some funding that's available. And again, with your health number and information, we can look into their system to see what coverage it might be. Sometimes an entry level pair of hearing aids might be fully covered. Sometimes there just might be some funding that helps towards those costs. But yes, certainly in Alberta, we're lucky to have some sort of support there.
Yeah. Now, just before we wrap this up, tell our viewers how they can get a hold of you.
So I'm at our Hearing Life clinic here in Lethbridge. Well, there's a few of us around, but there's lots of hearing clinics in Lethbridge and around to look into and get a hearing test. Typically, it's only within a few days that you should be able to make an appointment and get in to get things checked. So don't stress about long wait lists or anything like that. Just give us a call and we can get you in. Me particularly, I'm at my clinic half-time. I also work with the school divisions as an educational audiologist, which is kind of an interesting twist there to see how the students are able to learn and have access to the sound there. But yeah.
Well, that sounds really interesting. I think I might have buried the headline, but could you talk about hearing and learning and how that impacts children at school?
Yeah, so often the biggest thing is just access. With the teacher of the deaf that I work with, and we're all often talking about, visual problems are usually a little bit more obvious. When you see that they're not looking in the right direction at all, then there might be something happening there. With hearing, those students are usually kind of in the classroom and they might look like they're paying attention, but they don't have the same access to the sound that's coming through, so they can't process that sound. And so we just need to work with the students for advocating for themselves and work with their teachers and learning teams to make sure that the right equipment is in place and that the right training happens there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that. Thanks so much for being with us today, Mitchell.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it was great to have you here. That was Mitchell Harris. He is an audiologist with Hearing Life here in Lethbridge, Alberta.
Hollywood often portrays fathers as being a little goofy and sometimes not the sharpest knives in the drawer, which I believe is quite sad considering the powerful role that fathers play in society today. And according to our Heavenly Father, fatherhood is also very important when you read that in the Bible. Now, to discuss this in more detail is Rowan Crown. He's the lead pastor of Amazing Grace Community Church here in Lethbridge. Pastor Rowan Crown, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you for having me, Hal. It's good to be here.
So, Pastor Owen, many would agree that fathers play a very important role in the family dynamic. But sometimes, as dads, we do make mistakes. And those flubs can sometimes leave lasting hurts on our children. How can we really rebuild that relationship?
Yeah, I first want to start off by saying that I do not come here as the number one example of a father. And it's important to know that we are people who make mistakes, and I've failed as a father many times. So I think the first thing is recognizing our weaknesses as a father and how much we need the Lord and the Lord's guidance as we are fathers to our children, and really fathers to others, or examples of fathers to others in our lives.
So, as dads, you talked about guidance from our Heavenly Father. How about wisdom as well, that we really rely on God's Word and maybe seek more insight in His Word as a proper way of being a good father?
Yeah, I think, Hal, I think it's a very difficult time in which we live in, where the role of the father, as you said, by community examples or the examples in the world, that fathers are not looked upon as what Scripture would really portray fathers as. And so it's important that we look to God's word, we look to the wisdom of God and the fear of the Lord in order to help us to walk humbly as fathers and allow His fatherhood in our lives to reflect and build in us that character so we can be those examples to those around us.
Let's expand on that for just a moment here, Pastor Rowan. What do you see as the role for fathers today?
I think the role of fathers today is to walk in humility, to lead confidently, and to really be those people who listen, who react in wisdom, but also are not afraid to love others and love their kids in a way that is helpful in guidance and so forth. It's easy right now in this day and age because the role of fathers has diminished in really a fatherless generation to kind of take the back burner in the lives of our kids and our children. Sometimes there's this push to abdicate some of those leadership responsibilities, but really, God calls us as fathers to be leaders, using the personalities and the gifts He's given us to be the leaders and examples to those in our lives, especially our children.
You know, I'm a father myself of two wonderful kids, Matthew and Carissa. They're adults now, obviously, in their 20s, but I remember when they were younger, they were going down a certain path. I've been down that path. It led to destruction. It wasn't a good path. And I'm trying to encourage them and support them and love them, saying, guys, don't go down that path. I've been down that path. It's not a good path to go down. But as a father, sometimes you have to let go and let God and just let them learn, I guess. And that's what's really hard, I found, as a father, as a parent.
Yeah, I'm learning that still, Hal, to be honest, is when to surrender our kids to the Lord, right? We desire for them to grow up in the fear and nurture of the Lord, but there comes a time when we can't control our kids, that we really need to leave them up to the Lord. I've had to do over the last actually year a lot of repenting to God and to my kids for things that I have did or said to them unintentionally, but as they've gotten older, they've said, "Dad, you did this to me," and that hurt me. And so I've had to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of going before the Lord, and actually asking my kids for forgiveness for the ways in which I have treated them in the past, and asking the Lord to help me grow as a father as my kids grow older.
Is there almost a kind of reconciliation that fathers have to have with their children, perhaps?
Oh, ongoing reconciliation. That's what relationships are. Is that ongoing reconciliation and so forth. But we also don't need to beat ourselves up, because we, as fathers, often are doing the best we can with what we've been given. And so it's important to remain humble and repentant, but also realize that we are not perfect and we fall short of those expectations, but to quickly remind ourselves that we can go to God for forgiveness, and we can go to our kids in and asking them to forgive us too. That's not showing weakness in a sense that we are weak people. That's actually showing a weakness in strength, that we too need the Lord as we father those around us, and therefore it's actually a strength. And there's, as the Bible says, there's strength and weakness when we display that in a humble reliance upon the Lord.
In my family, fathers traditionally were disciplinarians. You know, part of our job was to correct, but along with that, really encourage our children and teach them along the way. How successful of a formula do you think that is for today?
Yeah, Hal, I would say this. I would say society and culture have changed a lot over the last 10, 20 years. The way I used to view the role of a father in my life is has changed in a lot of ways, and it's changed somewhat for the good, but also there are dangers that we can easily fall into if we don't if we don't remember those things. And so, yes, traditionally, the father has been the disciplinarian in the role of the family. Somewhat that has changed, where there's kids who grow up without fathers; they only have a single mom, and so that male authority can somewhat be a struggle for some. And so, how do we humbly bring that role back into the life of a family? It's difficult, and so it's a learning stage for many fathers in our generation. How do we display God's goodness, God's grace, but also the love of God through godly love and discipline in the family? It is a very difficult time in which we live in, and so we have to err on the side of caution at times, and be more encouraging, and not demand that we have this authoritative role in the lives of our kids, which has been looked upon now as a very bad thing. How do we show that authority, but also how do we show that with encouragement and humbly as well? That is the challenge for us as fathers today.
You know, Pastor Rowan, many of us have never had the blessing of a father, and somehow I think we all long for our dads to say, you know, son, daughter, I'm so proud of you. You are so amazing. You know, lifting up your children. How important is that kind of validation for our kids?
Oh, Hal, it is very, very important. For me as a kid, that was so important to have my father's recognition, to have my father's love and verbal affirmation was so important. I set my mission as a young father that I was going to do that. Have I always succeeded? No. But it's so important that as fathers, we are there for our kids, even and especially when they fall and fail, and when they mess up. We need to be the first ones there to love and care for them during those difficult times.
And to lift them up, absolutely. So, Pastor Owen, for fathers who are watching our program right now on Miracle Channel, Bridge City News, and have never actually done that, said, you know what, I'm really proud of you and I love you, they find it a little difficult, what advice would you give them to get started with that?
I think it comes down to searching your own heart before the Lord, right? And really turning to Him, and confessing the way in which you have not been there for your children in that way. And it's important because we have God the Father who loves us unconditionally. And so we can go to him with these things, and then we can really ask the Lord to help us go to our kids, go to our children, make that phone call, admit our wrongdoing and our sin, and then ask others to hold us accountable in that process. I just had a father figure who just died suddenly this week in my life, a mentor of mine. And the one thing about him is that he always challenged me as a father. He always said, how are you seeking the Lord, Rowan? How are you seeking the Lord in front of your wife and your kids? And the memory of that still sticks with me today, is that I need to be that example, that living example to my kids and the other children that are not my kids in my life, that look up to me as a father figure in their life.
You know, our condolences going out to you and your family with you losing your mentor. And let's talk about the importance of mentors as well, especially with maybe children who didn't grow up with a father but have that mentor, and that mentor can be a powerful, influential figure in that young person's life.
Oh, definitely. I would say this. I would say every father, every male who's listening out here, if you don't have mentors or men in your life that you can bond with and talk about the things of the Lord, talk about your struggles, then it's going to be extra. It's going to be extra harder to be the man that God has called you to be, and you need that in your life. You need men challenging you and examples in your life, speaking into your life, calling out your stuff when you need to, when it needs to be called out, and praying for you as you are doing the things that God has called you to do as a husband, as a father, as a worker, wherever you are. It is so, so important. I encourage every male who's listening out there to have some sort of mentor.
You know, one of the most common complaints about fathers seems to be, my dad didn't spend a lot of time with me. He was always at the office, always working, always on the road. So Pastor Rowan, how important is it just to spend some quality time with your kids and really investing in them?
It is so, so important. And you'll fail. And there are times when they will not like you being in their lives, and they will reject your wisdom. They laugh at me all the time. Every time they go out, I say, remember wisdom, remember wisdom. And they now joke about it because they know I'm going to say it all the time. But it's important that we have that constant presence in their life, because that's what God our Father is to us. I'm preaching on Romans 8 this week, and it's a beautiful passage about the fatherhood of God in our lives, that he's our Abba Father, he's our daddy. He's always present with us in the spirit. And so we can't be always present with them, but we can pray for them, seek the Lord for them, and remind them that we love them in a way that no one else has the opportunity to love them as a father in their lives.
You know, many dads like to put on that real tough exterior, that macho image for their kids. But I wonder if it's more important to actually teach and model to our kids, like you mentioned earlier, to walk humbly, to take responsibility for our actions, and to really apologize when we mess up. Say, you know, son, daughter, my bad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, it's so, so important. I come from that old school Hal where fathers, and I actually had a father that I grew up with until I was 18, and then I moved to the States and lived with my uncle, and then he became another father figure in my life, and he was tough as nails, and he really taught me what it means to and hold me accountable, and so I learned both sides of the coin in understanding that a father can be strong. A father can really be that strong leader in your life, but also a father needs to be humble. I still remember to this day when I made a major mistake, and my uncle, who is he's big and strong, and man, he put the fear of God into you. But when I made that major mistake, he didn't scream at me and yell at me. He walked up to me and put his loving arms around me and cried over me. And I still remember that to this day, that it was so unexpected. And I just wept. I just wept because that's what I needed. I needed a humble person to love me in my mistake. And that's what he did for me that day.
How about thoughts on how we can best honor our fathers in a very meaningful way?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have wrestled with that being a father, and even in my own struggles, in my own relationship, in understanding how I've responded to my father in the past. So I think it's important for us to be thankful to God, regardless of what our fathers have done to us. Right? That you may be out there and your father may have treated you very poorly in your life, but you can still be thankful for them, right? And you can pray for them. And I think it's important that we honor them by remembering even the things that they did for us that may have been small. But now, as a father, those small things, I look back and go, man, they weren't small, they were mighty things. My dad loved every person, a homeless person, an addict. Every time I walked with him in downtown Sydney, Australia, he would stop and talk to the alcoholic, right? I still remember that. And that was passed on to me. And there is not a homeless person that I do not meet, that I do not look in their eyes and say hello. I honor my father because he exemplified that for me growing up as a young man in Sydney, Australia.
Rowan Crown is the lead pastor of Amazing Grace Community Church here in Lethbridge. Pastor Rowan, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Hal, for having me on this very important topic, and the Lord's blessings on you and the program.
Thank you so much, you as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.